If you ever notice a random woman in your house, ignore her at all cost. I just found out the horrifying reason why she was here. It was December of 1999 when she infested our quiet, Midwestern home. My father called for me from downstairs. I assumed it was time for dinner. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs and had his hand up in an effort to keep me from coming down. It kind of reminded me of the time my father told me about the story of his own dad eating him out. But little did I know it would be much worse. The moment I saw the panic in his eyes, I knew something was wrong. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," he said. My heart started to race as he continued. "It's very important that you keep your eyes on me. You're going to notice someone else in our home, but you must ignore her as much as possible." I almost started laughing, my 12-year-old mind trying to comprehend what he was getting at, assuming this was some sort of out-of-character joke. Before I could respond, he continued, "She's going to whisper things, follow you, and whatever else she can to get your attention. It's going to be very difficult, son, but you must never interact with her. I promise she will leave, but only if you pretend she isn't there, and try not to think about her. Promise me." There were so many things I wanted to ask him, but I was too frightened and confused. I managed to spit out, "Okay, Dad. All right, come downstairs. It's time for dinner. Hurry, I've made her stronger just by telling you. But I had to. I can't afford you looking at her by mistake. Trust me. Now stay focused." He barked. I did as I was told and slowly crept down the stairs, keeping my eyes glued to my father's as he backpedaled into the kitchen. I felt the temperature drop significantly as I reached the first floor. I smelled a familiar, sickening and sour scent in the air. It reminded me of the time a raccoon died in our wall and stunk up the house for a whole week. My father and I sat down at the table at the same time. My sister was across from me. Her head hung and her eyes stared at the empty, porcelain plate in front of her. My mother pulled a casserole out of the oven. Her eyes were swollen and tear-stained. I kept my focus on my family, but out of the corner of my eye I could see a blurry mess of dark, matted hair, and sickly, gray skin. There was no energy in the kitchen, drained of all the warmth and laughter that usually accompanied our meals. My sister grabbed my knee under the table and whispered, "Can you see her too?" I nodded. "Quiet," my father hissed. The woman walked forward with wet, crackling footsteps. The smell was nauseating. She crept towards the table, stopping directly behind my sister, only a few inches away, and rested a decrepit hand on her shoulder. She winced in fear and stared at me. I immediately put my head down. My mother served our dinner, doing her best to pretend as if everything was okay. I could see my father clutching my sister's hand underneath the glass table in an attempt to keep her from completely losing it. My sister spent the entire dinner with the skeletal hand on her shoulder. Nearly inaudible whispers spewed from the woman's mouth and filled the room like white noise. And that's how we lived for months, doing our best to live a normal life despite the ever-present, unwanted guest. Even if we left the house, she was somehow able to follow us all. Whenever the four of us were in the car, she could be seen in the rear-view mirror or standing on the side of the road. My parents didn't let anyone visit, and never let us stay at friends' homes during the months of hell. We were able to whisper to one another when it was absolutely necessary to discuss her presence, if she wasn't too close. My father made us promise to never tell anyone. That was the only way to quarantine her, the parasite of attention. We concluded that she infected a single household at a time, unable to be seen by anyone outside the home unless their mind had been tainted with knowledge of her existence. I learned a few years later that my father was the reason for her arrival. His sister, back in the 70s, had been infected from another and had followed my aunt into their home. In 1999, for whatever reason, my father struggled to keep the thought of her at bay. In turn, he brought her back into his life. And ours. We kept the promise of keeping her a secret from others, and it was the hardest thing we've ever done. All of us tried leaving the house as a group, and she followed. We couldn't bring ourselves to break our family apart. It was hardest for my mother, who was stuck alone with her while we were at school and my father was at work. Everything changed the day my mother broke. It was a snowy February night. We had finished dinner and my mother decided to go to bed early. She was sitting on their bed, making herself almost impossible to ignore. My mother couldn't take it. I heard her screaming from the bedroom, demanding that she leave us alone. My father sprinted upstairs to try and stop her. That was the last I ever saw my mother. A pool of blood on the white carpet was all that remained. The woman was still there, but my mother was gone. In the following weeks, she whispered to me. She told me I could see my mother again. All I had to do was look and ask how. I never did. The reason I am telling you is because I want you to think about her. I saw her again, this morning, for the first time in 18 years. I cannot afford to lose my wife or children to the parasite. I need you to think about her dark hair and gray skin. Think about her in your home, so that she may leave mine. You're already infected, and eventually you're going to notice a woman in your home. You must ignore her. It's for your own good. I'm so sorry.